Hey y'all, welcome back, and welcome to my Roll of Reads vlog. I'm actually starting this quite late. It's the 10th of March and the readathon started on the 1st, but I completely forgot when I was putting together my video plans that I was going to be visiting family that first week of March, and I didn't want to have to carry my camera on the plane or make anybody else be in the vlog, so didn't take my camera, didn't do any vlogging while we were there. I did do some reading, and I do have a few clips from my phone to share with all of you because we did do some fun stuff while we were down there. But yeah, that was why I'm starting rather late. I feel like the best place to start now is maybe talking about what I did read while I was there. I didn't read a whole lot, but I did read one book for the readathon while we were visiting family, and that was What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. Sorry, What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. I keep getting the titles confused. I've done that so many times. I keep typing it as What Moves the Dead as well. But this is the second book in the Sworn Soldier series, and I swapped this one in for the LGBTQIA+ rep prompt, which I had originally planned to read The Invocations, but this was a lot easier to pack given that it's a novella and it's quite short. So I ended up reading this one instead. It does have a non-binary main character, and it's really just a fun series. I really like these books. These are horror books. The first one's based on The Fall of the House of Usher. This one I don't know is based on any specific story, but it does incorporate some kind of folklore that was really fun. But this one is following the main character Alex as they are returning to the hunting lodge that they own. It used to belong to their father, and then since he passed, they now have kind of taken over ownership of this hunting lodge, and they are going to host some of their friends at this hunting lodge. But when they get there, the caretaker has died and nobody will quite tell them what exactly happened, and there seems to be some fear around a specific supernatural creature that is stealing the air from people's lungs. And yeah, it's super creepy and atmospheric, just like the first one. I do think I like What Moves the Dead just a little bit better. I really enjoyed this, but I think that the tension didn't quite last in this one the way that it did in the first book in this series. I think What Moves the Dead has a much more tense atmosphere overall. In this one, there were long sections where there wasn't very much in terms of horror happening. I did really like the characters though, and we get a couple of new characters that I thought were really fun. We also learn a lot more about this kind of fictional country that Alex is from called Galatia. We learn more about like their differing use of pronouns. Alex is, as a sworn soldier, uses Ka-Kan pronouns, but we also learn about like the different pronouns that they use for God. They also have specific pronouns for their priests and things like that. Like specific jobs have specific pronouns associated with them. And it just was a really interesting entry in this series, just kind of learning more about where Alex is from and what their kind of childhood was like, and you know, how they feel about that. It's just really interesting look at kind of Alex, and I also really liked that there was this thing for Alex where they were suffering from PTSD. This is set kind of, I think in like late 1800s was the vibe I was getting, and that means it wasn't really like talked about as like PTSD, but there's this mention of, I think they call it soldier's heart here, but kind of like shell shock basically. And there's a lot of discussion of that in this and how Alex's experiences as a soldier has affected them. And then there's also this kind of lingering effect of the events in the first book, where that clearly has had a pretty big impact on Alex and their well-being. And so I really like that was kind of a lingering thing, that it wasn't just like, well, this thing happened but now I'm fine. It was that Alex was clearly deeply impacted by the events, and so that continues to be relevant here. So I would say you need to read What Moves the Dead before you read What Feasts at Night. But I just really had a great time reading this. This was so much fun. It was very creepy at some points. I really liked a lot of the horror elements that were there. I just would have liked to see more of them because there were some pretty big lulls in the actual like creepiness, but when the horror elements were present, they were really well done, and I just had a great time reading this. I love the new characters, and I'm excited. Well, actually, I don't know if we're getting more in this series. I'm about to say I'm excited to read more about Alex, but I don't know if we are getting more in this series. If we are, fantastic. I love these books, and I would definitely read more about Alex's different adventures, as much as I feel like Alex probably deserves a break from all of the horror. I'm very interested to see if we get more books in this series, because I just really love Alex as a protagonist, and I really like the way that this series is kind of dealing with different topics. So great book, had a great time with that. I ended up giving it, I think, 4.5 stars. My current spreadsheet doesn't have any room for half stars, so I think I gave it 4 stars. But yeah, really enjoyed that, and I'm delighted that I finally got to it because I meant to read it in February. So that's the only thing I read that we were there. I did start something else, but it's not really relevant to the readathon because I'm rereading Persuasion to hopefully write a paper on it for one of my classes. So that didn't fit any of the prompts. I tried to make it work and it just doesn't. So anyway, that is all I've read. And now here's a montage. This is a completely random clip. I don't even know what video this is going to make it into. I'm currently visiting family, and as you can tell, I'm getting ready for bed, so apologies for all of this. But I just hit 200 subscribers, and I'm like shocked and blown away. 200 was my goal for the year, and it's March. So it's a hell of an end to my evening. And I just wanted to quickly say, like, thank you all so much. I'm glad you're enjoying my content, and I'm so grateful to have you all here. And yeah, welcome if you're new, welcome back if you're returning. But yeah, wow. It's been a few days, but I have started my next book, and I've decided to go off TBR again, which is just typical me behavior. I do that like every time I participate in a readathon. I immediately go off my TBR. But I have a library book that I need to read so I can turn it back in. So for the mental or physical health rep prompt, I've decided to go ahead and read The Clinic by Kate Quinn. This is due like next week at the library, so it kind of needed to be worked into the list somehow. So this one is about a woman who's, just realized my microphone is just sticking right into the frame there. A woman whose sister is like a famous actress, but her sister has gone into rehab, and suddenly there's these rumors circulating that her sister has died and that it was suicide, and the main character, Meg, does not believe that that's what happened. Typical thriller setup. She decides to check herself into this rehab facility that's in a remote area in the Pacific Northwest and try to figure out what happened to her sister. Meg is also herself battling some sort of addiction and is having to kind of deal with both of those things at once. Her sister had a drug addiction. I'm unclear at this point what kind of addiction Meg is struggling with, but it's her kind of needing to deal with that and also kind of coming to terms with the loss of her sister, who she had a very tense relationship with because she felt like she was always being compared to her, and trying to figure out at the same time what actually happened to her sister and, like, you know, not get killed in the process. So it feels like a very typical thriller setup, but it sounds really fun. And the thing I also find very interesting is that in the, there's like an author, it's one of those that has like book club questions in the back, and there's like a little author interview thing. But it mentions that the depiction of rehab in this particular book is based on the author's own experiences in rehab for alcoholism. So I think that could be really interesting, and that's part of why I felt like it would fit this prompt really well, is that it's based on the author's own experiences of her struggle with addiction. So sounded really interesting to me, and I've heard, I think, like one good review of this. I haven't heard many people talk about it yet, but I did see one person say that this was really good. So I am very excited to be reading it. I've read the first 2 chapters, I think, and I am definitely intrigued. This is one that seems to have like very short chapters, and it's got an alternating POV, which I was not expecting. There's like a prologue from the sister's point of view. Her name was Haley, and we get kind of like the moment that something bad happens to her, but we don't really see what happens. And then now I'm diving into Meg's perspective, and kind of chapter 1 we find out about her job at a casino. She basically is like helping catch people who are cheating on the casino floor and having them removed from the casino. And she's always felt like in her sister's shadow, so like she's catching bad guys, but her sister gets all the attention. So that's kind of the setup and where I'm at. I've just read that chapter, and it looks like there's another character that I'm not sure how she fits into the story at this point, but it does look like it's alternating POV and very short chapters, so it should be a pretty fun, quick read, I'm thinking. Probably also pretty dark, if I had to guess. It's much longer than I thought it was going to be. It's like 400 and some pages, but I think that the short chapters should make it go by pretty quick. So that's what I'm planning to read next, and I am hopefully gonna find some time for that soon. Right now, today, I'm working on writing my final project proposal for one of my classes and working on my thesis, but if I can get those two things done, I should have some time in the next couple of days to really like dig in and do some reading, which would be great because I haven't had a whole lot of time for leisure reading lately. And I'm gonna have to stop talking now because my battery is flashing at me, so I think that's pretty much the update, and I'll check in with you guys when I've actually made some progress in the clinic. It's been a few days and there's a slight change of plans. I know I had started the clinic, but I'm actually going to be turning that one into the library because it's due in a few days. I haven't had time to read it in the last little bit, and it's like 450 pages, so I just know I'm not going to have time to read it. That and the other library book I have right now I need to turn back in because I realized this is St. Martin's Press title, and since that boycott is still ongoing, I feel like the easiest way to not talk about it is just to not read it. So instead, I'm going to pivot back to my original TBR and read the Decagon House Murders by Akito Ayatsuji for the Settled on Island prompts. We're just focusing in on that TBR because I really want to read more books off my shelves. That was what I was focusing on when I made that TBR. I've been reading a lot of library books this year and not doing a very good job of that. So gonna be doing this instead, and I'm really excited to dive into this book because one, I'm just really in the mood for a murder mystery right now. I went book shopping with my mom the other day and like everything I picked up was a murder mystery, so I'm clearly just in the mood for a murder mystery at the moment. But I'm also interested to read this because I know this is inspired by And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which I actually don't really like. I really enjoyed the reading experience of it up until the end, and then I found the ending really disappointing and it kind of ruined the book for me. So I know that that's an unpopular opinion. I know it's one of her most loved works, but I just didn't enjoy it all that much once I got to the ending. And I'm curious to see what this book is going to do with that source material and if I end up liking this better than I liked And Then There Were None. I'm also interested to see how this is all going to play out because we get a prologue here that's from the killer's point of view telling us that this is basically a big revenge plot, and I'm curious to see like why they want revenge, what's happened that's made them so angry and so hurt that they want to kill this entire club of students. So I'm curious to find out about all of that. And then also this house, the Decagon house, is literally a decagon, so it's got this like weird layout, and I'm really interested to see how that is going to play into the story as well. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I did go ahead and start it. I'm like 17 pages in, but I'm hoping to get through this in the next little bit. We'll see what actually happens. School is always, you know, a little bit unpredictable and how long it's going to take me to get everything done, but I am trying to find more time to read in the evenings just because I feel like I feel so much more better rested. I sleep a lot better when I take time to like wind down and read before bed. So I'm going to be trying to do that a little bit more, and I'm hoping that this will be the first book to kind of help me get back into that habit because I used to do it all the time when I was younger. So anyway, that is the new plan, and I'm actually going to go get some sleep. And I'll check back in with you guys when I have made some progress on the Decagon House Murders. Great news, I finally finished a book instead of starting a new one because I read Train of Angels today, and I actually got the audiobook from my library so that I could listen to it while I was at work today. I had a lot of tedious tasks to be working on, so it was a perfect day for an audiobook, and this was both a terrible and wonderful decision. Wonderful because it really helped solidify Rebecca Roanhorse's favorite author. I chose this for the favorite author prompt. I already knew I loved her writing, but this is the third book of hers I'm giving 5 stars. So I really enjoyed this. I loved listening to this one today. It was a terrible decision though because the ending made me cry. It's very bittersweet, and I was like sitting at my desk like trying not to cry fully while I was sitting there working, like turning away from the door like nobody witnessed me. So that was a thing that happened to me today, but this book was so good. This one is about a murder mystery happening in a kind of alternate version of the Midwest. It's 1880s Colorado, I think, in a mining town called Goetia that is inhabited by the descendants of angels and demons who were involved in the big war between heaven and hell right after Lucifer rebelled against God. And so now they're in this very strictly hierarchical society where the descendants of the angels are known as the elect, and descendants of the demons are called the fallen. And the fallen are kind of the bottom level of society. Everybody here is human, but there are like other people, other creatures living amongst the humans as well. But the society is ruled by the descendants of angels who are called the virtues, who have sworn themselves to the various orders of the different angels. So there's like the angel Raphael, there's Chamuel, what's the other one? That's Michael and Azrael are two of the others. So there's these different orders. They all have like different kind of bureaucracy purposes, I guess. There's like an order of justices, there's an order of like healers and medics, there's an order of executioners, that kind of thing. So there's all these different orders of angels. They're kind of the highest ranking. Then you have the elect, which are just kind of the normal descendants of angels who tend to be like the higher class people in this mining town. And then everybody else is just regular humans or fallen. So within that setting, there are these two sisters, Mariel and Celeste, who are both half fallen. I believe it's implied that Celeste and Mariel are both half fallen, half elect, but that Celeste doesn't bear the mark of the fallen and Mariel does. So they have very different like experiences within society because Celeste can kind of pass for the elect. And so that's happening, and they both work at a saloon. Celeste is a card sharp, Mariel is a singer, when on one of the most important nights of the year, it's this big holiday that marks the end of the big war and is, you know, celebrated by the angels and their descendants and mourned by the fallen and the demons. During this night, her sister is arrested by the local sheriff along with a host of virtues for having apparently murdered a virtue, and Celeste takes it upon herself to try and prove her sister's innocence. So that's the kind of setup, and I don't want to tell you too much about what actually happens in this book, but I loved Celeste as a character. I think that she's really interesting because she does some really like reprehensible things, but she's doing it all like because she loves her sister, and there's like guilt on her part for something that happened when they were much younger, and she's always kind of like sworn to herself that she would never leave her sister behind again. And so she's doing all of these things for her sister, and it's kind of like, what are the lengths that Celeste is willing to go to ensure her sister's safety and get her released from jail where she's being held. And there's all of these other relationships that she has that I think were really interesting. She has a kind of like motherly relationship, or like the other character is a motherly relationship to her, that's like her employer who she's known for many years. There's another guy that works at the bar that she works at who's like super sweet and just this like clever inventor. There's also a demon lord and an interesting figure amongst one of the orders of angels that she starts interacting with. There's a woman that works for the newspaper. So there's all these like really interesting relationships that she either has at the beginning of the book or forms across the course of it that I think are really interesting and complicated by Celeste and her kind of like unwillingness to let her sister go in any way. And I just really enjoyed the complexities of those relationships. I loved the direction that this mystery took. I found the ending to be so satisfying. I think it was brilliant, and it really, I think, kind of subverts your expectations for a book like this and some of the topics that it's talking about. I just thought it was brilliantly done. I think the ending is super bittersweet, but in a way that like made it feel like that was the most logical ending. Like there wasn't another way that the story could end. And I also love this book feels like it's set in a world where like the world goes on even if this story has ended. And that's one of my favorite things that a book can do, is make me feel like that world exists beyond the scope of the book. So I just absolutely loved this, and this has really just cemented Rebecca Roanhorse even more as one of my favorite authors. I've loved everything I've read from her. This makes me even more excited to go back and read Black Sun because I'm partway through that, and I need to, I think, kind of restart it and then continue on through the series. But yeah, I'm so glad I picked this up. I'm kind of sad it took me this long to get to this because this has been on my shelf for a while now, but I'm really glad I decided to read the audiobook. Also, the narrator for that is Dion Graham, and he did a fantastic job. His voices for all the characters were great, and he was just a delight to listen to. So I highly recommend the audiobook for this one, and I'm so glad that I picked this one up today. It was a really good time. I'm struggling with the writing in this one, y'all. I am not much further than I was before. I'm on page 30 or 31. And at this point, the characters have made it to this island of Tsunojima, which I have now learned is called Horn Island because it has these 3 rocky horns off of the side of it. So they've arrived at the island. We've been kind of alluded to that there's some sort of murder that's taken place there previously. And this is taking place in March. I believe there's a murder that's taken place like back in September. And that's kind of the history of the island. I thought it was an older murder than that, but apparently it's actually fairly recent, and they're going to visit this island because they are in this murder mystery club. So they're gonna go like investigate themselves and spend a week on the island or whatever. And I'm really struggling because the writing is very choppy and I don't love the way the characters are being characterized. They feel really flat so far. There are 7 characters and so far we have personalities basically for like 3 of them, and they're very archetypal, but in a way that I think is not effective, if that makes sense. So we have Van, Carr, Ellery, Luro, Poe, Agatha, and Orcsy. And those are all the characters in this club. They're also all named after, or nicknamed after, famous like crime and mystery writers, right? So Agatha Christie, Baroness Orcsy, S.S. Van Dien was not one I was familiar with, but you know, Edgar Allan Poe, etc. So that's kind of the gist. But Ellery, Orcsy, and Agatha are the only 3 who've gotten kind of some characterization so far. Like, I feel like I get who they are as people. And Ellery is very annoying. He's very much like a know-it-all. He's kind of the leader of the group, it feels like. And he keeps using the word intellectual to describe things. That, like, murder mysteries shouldn't be gritty or realistic. They should be like an intellectual puzzle. And he keeps going on about that for the first chunk of the book. But he has this very, like, know-it-all feeling to him. He almost feels to me like, if you've read The Secret History, I haven't finished it, but he reminds me a little bit of Bunny Corcoran in the beginning of The Secret History, but without the kind of like humor and charm. He's just kind of annoying. And then we have Agatha and Orcsy, and Agatha is like your typical pretty girl. She's tall, she's skinny. I think she's blonde, I don't really quite remember. She's pale, she's like a little bit high maintenance, not quite high strung. She's very chipper and like optimistic and outgoing. She's complains pretty early on because they're on this island with like no electricity. A bunch of the like systems on the island were burned down after this previous murder that happened, and so she's like immediately complaining that they only have instant coffee instead of actual coffee and things like that. And it's like you knew you were coming to an island with no electricity, right? So she keeps kind of complaining about things. It's like it feels like she should have been prepared for those things, but at the same time she's just like very outgoing and chipper. She's also pretty bossy, and they kind of jokingly call her the queen when she like kicks them out of the kitchen. Also the women immediately start like cleaning the kitchen and kick the guys out of the house, so that a little weird. And then the other woman, Orcsy, is the opposite of Agatha. We're told explicitly that she's the opposite of Agatha, and more specifically she is short, she is plump as the book puts it. She wears black to try and cover that, but the book says that it makes her look old-fashioned or outdated. She's very timid, she doesn't like to look people in the eyes, so she's like very submissive in a way that Agatha isn't, in a kind of uncomfortable way, I feel like, in what I've read so far. So I don't love the way that they've been characterized, and then just kind of the dialogue in general is really choppy and weird. We keep getting repeated details, like we've been told Poe is a 4th-year medical student like 2 or 3 times now, and I'm only 30 pages in, but it keeps repeating that information to me. And then also the characters talk to each other as if they were in like an Ace Attorney game. Bear with me, I'm plugging in my laptop. Now that my laptop is plugged in. They all talk like they're in an Ace Attorney game. If you've played an Ace Attorney game, there's this tendency, especially in the early cases in a game, to start like foreshadowing that there was some sort of big event that happened in the past that we have to talk about because that's going to be like relevant in a later case. And there's this like feeling like the characters have to do their little animation sprite. They have to do their like thing before they can say whatever they're gonna say. They have to like move and then talk. And when they do talk, it feels like there should be like orange highlight telling me like, pay attention to this detail, you're gonna need it later. Because it's like, if you played the first Ace Attorney game, there's this reference to this thing called the DL6 incident. I'm not gonna tell you anything else about that, but there's this thing where the characters are like, oh, maybe this is connected to the DL6 incident. What? You mean that incident that happened like several years ago? Yeah, the incident that happened in the courthouse. Like, you're getting these kinds of moments where characters will refer back to the DL6 incident and talk about it in this very like weird abstract way, and it's just telling you like this is going to be important, it will keep coming up. And the book is doing that with the murders that have happened previously on the island. So we get this like, oh, I can't believe people are going there, not since the incident. And then a little bit later, you know, the incident, the thing that happened to Mr. Nakamura Seiji, who owned the island. And then much later, like, yeah, Nakamura Seiji, who owned the island, and he and his family were murdered on the island. Like, it's just this constant reference back. Like, I would expect for Nakamura's name to be like in orange highlight, lest I forget that that's important, because it just keeps repeating it. And also it's all the characters like doing their little animation sprite and then talking about whatever piece of that mystery that they have. So especially Ellery, being the kind of know-it-all leader, is the one that's like telling the story now. So I've just gotten to the bit where I'm gonna learn a little bit more about that murder. I don't feel like it's spoilers to say that the previous owner of the mansion was murdered, and that's like why people don't like to come to the island. I feel like that's pretty straightforward based on the premise, but it's just like this constant repetition of stuff, as if I'm going to forget from page to page the name of the guy that lived on the island, or the fact that he was murdered, even though it's told me like 3 times. And now we're getting this like big monologue from Ellery and a couple of the other characters who are like jointly telling the story. And so it's all just feeling very stilted and artificial to me so far. And I think I'm wondering if like Ellery's whole like it should be an intellectual puzzle thing is kind of the way that this isn't like going to be structured. I don't know, because I know this was inspired by And Then There Were None, but I felt like And Then There Were None had this pretty like natural feeling for, you know, a modern reader reading something that was written like 100 years earlier. Obviously language evolves and changes, but it felt like the dialogue was pretty natural. Like the interactions between the characters felt natural, and it just does not feel natural here. So I don't know what's gonna happen here. I don't know if I'm gonna end up DNFing this. I'm gonna keep pushing through a little bit longer. I'm only on page 30. I'm gonna give it to like page 50 to 100 to actually get a sense more of what the actual story is gonna be like once I get out of this kind of initial introducing the concepts point of the book. But yeah, at the moment I am really struggling, and I don't know if I might end up DNFing this and replacing it with a different book. Elwood here was being a bit of a menace earlier with the loom being out in my office, because I'm currently working on a weaving project, which I think I'll be seeing a video of this probably before this vlog goes up, but like I'm working on that. Little man was being a menace. He really wanted to mess with the loom, but now he's a sleepy little guy. He's got to recharge for doing some more crime later. And he's got a buddy. So, since my last little rant a couple of days ago about the Decagon House murders, I did read a few more pages, and I'm actually intrigued now because it looks like there's going to be some sort of interesting friendship between Agatha and Orczy, and it's starting to seem like the book maybe is going to address some of the stereotyping that I'm having some issues with. So I'm hopeful that it's going to go in a different direction and that it's going to like surprise me, and I'm feeling a little less concerned about it now. I definitely do want to continue with the book. I'm still struggling a little with the writing. I think the dialogue is feeling very Ace Attorney-ish, but without the kind of silliness and charm that makes Ace Attorney work. But I am going to continue on with this book. However, I'm not going to continue on with it immediately because I'm at risk of forcing myself into a reading slump if I do, just because I'm really not feeling like picking it up, and if I keep going like I have to read that before I do anything else, I'm not going to end up feeling like I can read anything, and it's going to put me in a slump, which I just don't want to do right now. So instead, I'm going to swap out a different book, or swap in a different book for It Takes Place on an Island. And I remembered that I need to finish Frankenstein this week. I'm actually going to be finishing it today, and it does, in fact, take place partially on an island. So I did check the facts for the readathon, and it's fine if the book only takes place on an island for part of the story, and volume 3 of Frankenstein does take place, a pretty good chunk of it anyway, takes place in England and Ireland, which are both island nations. So that's going to work perfectly, and I am going to be finishing it today, so I'll be knocking out that prompt today too. It says a reread, so like I really wanted to read something new for this instead of doing a reread. However, I do have to finish this anyway, so it kind of works out perfectly, and I'm okay with this decision because I know that it's not going to put me in a reading slump, and it's going to help me prioritize the things that I need to get done. I'm also kind of anticipating being out of town possibly for the last few days of the month, so I need to just kind of alter my plans for this last chunk of the readathon anyway. My partner has invited me to spend Easter with him and his family, and it's been a little while since I've been to see his extended family, so I feel like I want to make time for that. So the next couple of days are really going to be me powering through some research and getting some stuff done so that I feel like I can go and not be like stressed about school stuff. So with that kind of knowledge, I decided that I'm just gonna slot in. I don't know what I was trying to say there. I'm going to read Frankenstein for the prompt instead, which I have already said, and I feel like that's really going to be the best decision I can make in this point. It took me longer than I had hoped, but I have finished my reread of Frankenstein. It's about 11:30, and I spent a lot of time trying to really attend to the details because this is my third read, and I was trying to really pay attention to where the theme of happiness and the search for happiness was kind of coming in, and there was a detail that I was particularly interested in, a specific word that I was like counting repetitions of and looking at like the context where it was cropping up. So I was really interested in that, and I'm glad that I took the time to reread it and really like dig into those details. And now I know what I'm gonna write about for my lightning round, so I'm gonna write that first thing tomorrow morning. I don't have the brain cells right now to write it tonight, but I have officially finished my reread of Frankenstein, and I will go ahead and, you know, jot that down and mark that as done for Roll of Reads as well, since a portion of that is set on an island. And I had forgotten just how much of like part 3 is set on either England, Scotland, the Orkney Islands, and Ireland. So yeah, worked out nicely. And I think I am gonna go ahead and end this vlog here. I'm looking at what I have left for my TBR for the readathon, and I just don't think I'm going to get to anything else in the time that I have left, because I'm really going to be using this week for research. So yeah, I don't think I'm probably gonna get to The City We Became or Iron Widow because they're still pretty long. I'm really not in the mood for any mushroom horror, and I don't know if I want to do anything as thinky brain as more Shakespeare right now. So I'm just gonna be happy with the 3 books that I have accomplished and leave it there. I feel pretty good about that, given that I knew it was gonna be a busy month. So that being said, I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.